The image drawn for the Vikings in the modern age: they are dirty, barbaric, bloodthirsty people who plunder everything they come across. However, a number of archaeological discoveries have been made that allow us to re-question this image of their culture. What is even more surprising is that the fairytale stories told about them may actually be true. There's more to the coverage of Viking warfare than just correcting misinformation that they had horned helmets. Without further ado, here is what we need to know about the wars and lives of these fearsome Scandinavian soldiers who dominated the northwestern regions of Europe for more than 200 years. They're older than we thought. There is a definitive date for the beginning of the Viking era, the 8th of June 793. This is the date given for the first Viking conquest, with the siege of the monastery of Lindisfarne on the coast of England. But an excavation on the Estonian island of Saaremaa suggests that the culture's roots date back much earlier than we thought. The excavated mass grave bore signs that the 33 people on the two boats were all Scandinavians and that they had probably all been killed in a bad raid. The site has been dated to between 700 and 750, well before the Viking raid on the British Isle. Like many other Viking ships, most of them had decayed. However, the presence of the iron rivet remaining in the soil allows the reconstruction of the boat. This pushes back the time frame of early Viking expansion by about 120 years and may even change what we know about the history of sailing. This finding was accompanied by the discovery of a larger boat powered by sails instead of oars. This second finding shows that the Vikings began to dominate the seas much earlier than we thought. Archaeologists have been able to piece together some of what happened during a raid by early Vikings after crossing a sea nearly 100 miles wide. After a battle, surviving Viking warriors gathered the bodies of their dead for a ceremonial burial. They buried the bodies in ships, covered them with their shields, and either broke or bent their swords. The actual circumstances of the mass grave are still a mystery, and it is only known that it was built in haste. Initially, there was not much difference between war and merchant ships. Viking warships were a defining feature of Viking raids and military actions, and there was diversity in the designs of these ships. Before the 10th century, the Vikings had little distinction between merchant ships and warships, and all were used for military purposes overseas. Simply put, unlike the specialized ships designed for military purposes shown in the TV series The Vikings, the first Viking raids on the English coast, including the sack of the Lindisfarne monastery in 793, which marks the beginning of the Viking Age, were probably hybrids that were not prepared for combat purposes. It was built with the help of ships. However, in the period after the 10th century, the Vikings endeavored to design specialized military warships with structural modifications for both power and speed. Such as Snekja, Finn, Skeed, Water Cutter, and Drekka, Dragon. This meant more rowers for longer and thinner ships. On the other hand, with increasing trade, special commercial ships with wider sails and higher sides were built, called korpsskip. A few Viking ships could carry 300 people alone. A traditional slender Viking ship needed only one person at the oar when navigating calm waters. However, in case of war, 2 more soldiers would join him to help the rower to increase the speed of the ship and to protect him from enemy attack. As Viking raids became more profitable and organized, the profits were converted into bigger and better warships. As an example of this, Norway AD. According to legend, the ship named Long Serpent belonged to King Olaf Tryggvason, who ruled between 995–1000 BC. During the Battle of Svolder, he carried 8 men per oar, and counting the other warriors, that meant more than 550 people. This number may be an exaggeration. However, if we calculate from 4 men per oar, the total number is still around 300. Most battles took place at sea and performed like land battles. When 2 opposing fleets faced each other in naval battles, the Vikings made sure that the fight was conducted like battles on land. So how? Before the war started, they would create enormous platforms by gathering their largest ships, which they placed on the main lines, with ropes, with their rails facing each other. In such a formation, the largest and longest ships, commanded by the king or other warlords, would be kept in the middle of the fleet, with their bows, bardi in Scandinavian, facing the enemy ships. These ships, which were in the thick of the battle, were reinforced with armored plates and even sharp iron protrusions called skeg, which were used to punch holes in enemy ships. These giant floating platforms were supported by smaller boats on their sides. These were deployed in this way so that the defeated enemy could be followed. Before face-to-face combat began, the enemy would be showered with arrows, javelins, and even stones. The Vikings never used the classic naval warfare tactics of attacking the oars of enemy ships, at least not deliberately. Instead, they relied heavily on strategies that enabled crews to fight hand-to-hand, just like on land. The most basic military unit, the family. In Scandinavian society, tribes were used as fighting units. The subdivision of such a unit often belonged to an extended family or clan. In essence, the family was considered the basic war group, and united clans were called ayet. The essential relationship between the bonds of familiarity and war gave rise to the warrior culture at the core of the Vikings. The ayet trained together, plundered together, and fought together. Looking at the mass graves specially built for the AET members who died during the war, we can even say that they were buried together. The Viking society was made up of sailors, raiders, and plunderers, and their families who waited at home, sometimes taking their women with them. We can define it as. However, excavations reveal that the graves of Vikings who died at home are at least as impressive as those buried abroad. When the Vikings were at home, they farmed. They worked the land, but they did not do it alone. One of the reasons they raided other villages was to return with slaves called thralls who would work with them. New evidence shows that when Vikings died, their slaves were also killed. Tombs in Norway, built between 400 and 1050 BC, show not only that many Vikings were buried with thralls, they were decapitated before joining their masters in the grave. It also revealed that there was a class structure and life differences. While the diet of the upper class was based on meat and vegetables, the skeletons of the thralls show that their diet was limited to fish. Fish was cheap and plentiful, but meat from animals had a religious and sacred context appropriate only to the upper class. Many thralls were not only killed but also sacrificed. The tombs housing numerous thralls bear signs of the sacrificial procedure, including the binding of their hands and feet. Archaeologists believe this was done as a way to honor the dead.